Here's the question we're asking. Is ending the life of a human fetus morally acceptable? On an intellectual level, this is the question. Is this right or wrong? Should this be allowed, or morally should this be not allowed? So some facts about abortion. First of all, an estimated 862,000 abortions took place in 2017. 2017 is I think, just looking at it, I know we have stats in the last few years, but this was the last year that we have like concrete evidence, and like they do a bunch of studies, and it goes to that because it just takes time to figure out and to do studies. As you can imagine, even studies about abortion can be very politically motivated, so it's hard to even get like these are the stats and the numbers. But that number is as close as we can get. There's good news and bad news. Here's the good news. Abortions are on the decline. It's good. It used to be over 1 million every year. It's on a decline. Here's the bad news. It's because pregnancies are on the decline. That there are just less pregnancies than there was in the past. And the abortion rate in 2017 was 184 abortions per 1,000 live births. So if you look at that, it's it's 18.4%. 18.4%, which I don't know how, again, your position on abortion, but that's fairly significant. Nearly 1 out of 5. In total, between 20 and 22% of all pregnancies end in abortion. That is 1 out of 5. Again, it's in the last few years, it's maybe the last half decade or so, a little lower than it happens in the past, but about 1 out of 5 pregnancies. So what we're talking about is not an insignificant statistic. Since Roe v. Wade, just over 60 million babies have been aborted. The number is actually closer to 62 million. Again, that's a significant number. Those are just even reported abortions. There certainly are some that we just don't know about. In 2014, another study was done, and this is the one that might be, of all the numbers, maybe you've seen this before, this one might be one of the more shocking. 30% of aborting women identify themselves as Protestant or Christian, and 24% identified themselves as Catholic. If you add those numbers together, you get 54%. So here's what this means of women having abortions. Over half identify with faith. That's a substantial number. In 2004, the Guttmacher Institute anonymously did a survey, and this was a well-known survey that's still used today and referenced, and it's not a conservative institute at all, but they did a survey and anonymously surveyed 1,200 post-abortive women from various clinics all across the country. And here's what, I just realized I don't have, this would be helpful, wouldn't it? There you go. After I told you, don't worry about filling it all in, I just totally pulled oh, good. Okay, you got it all? All right, good, and we're gonna move on. Do you need that for a minute? Because okay, all right. I'll let you look at it. All right, you got it. There we go. In 2004, they did the survey, and here's what they found. The number one reason, 25% of the women who had abortions identified the reason was they weren't ready for a child. 1 out of 4 of those who had abortions said this was the reason. 23% said they can't afford it. I'm not out of position. Maybe they're younger or don't have a job or in school, and just look at this and say, financially, this is not possible. The third reason is they're done having children. The other side, it's 19%. So again, nearly 20% said it wasn't, I'm not ready for children. It's, I'm done. I've had, this was not supposed to happen. This wasn't the plan. And then it goes on, and they go through all of the various reasons, and there's a whole bunch of them. At the bottom of the list, and I do want to at least caution that, given the topic, there is a level of viewer discretion here. I hope we understand. The bottom of this list, number 10 or so, said that they were victim of rape, which is less than 0.5%. The number, if you do the study, actually was one lady, which puts it far less than 0.5%. It's actually 0.08%, not even a 0.1%. It's lower than 0.1% that would say this was the reason. Now, we'll look at this here in a second, why that's significant, but this is the study. Now, let's ask this question. When is a person a person? I think it's a fair question. It sounds a little, I was talking with someone else earlier today, and I'm like, it sounds a little Dr. Seuss-ish, right? Like who is a who? What is a who? That's a thing, right? But really, when we talk about people, persons, you and I, when are we a person? When do we become person and attain personhood? The argument I will make no apologies for my position. I think it is the correct, not because I believe it. I think it is the biblical, and I think it is the most God-honoring and acceptable position in which we say abortion is not morally acceptable. That abortion is wrong. It's not a matter of preference. So what I'm going to be defending tonight, whether you agree or disagree or like it or don't like it or, never want to look at me again, I get that. There's a lot of people who don't, I understand, is this. I'm going to defend and argue that a fetus is a person and that you are a person at conception. And that this is, if we're going to draw a line in the sand, it's the only possible line we can draw and still say that it is morally right. So I'm going to argue from, this is not I didn't create this at all, but there's a guy, Stephen Schwartz, who wrote in The Moral Question of Abortion, the SLED argument. If you get nothing out of tonight and you want to have a better understanding of how to best explain why a fetus is a human being and a person that should be protected, it is this argument, SLED. These all stand for various descriptions and reasons why we believe, I say we, I'm just assuming that we all are together believing this, that I believe and why we should believe that a fetus is a human. The difference between a fetus and a human is honestly little to nothing. So here it is. The blank on the S on your blank is size. Does the size of a person dictate their value, or if they are a person or not? The unborn is clearly smaller than a born human, right? Especially early trimester, like early pregnancy, of course, naturally. It's hard to reason how a difference in size, though, disqualifies someone from being a person. We know this. In this room, we are different sizes, right? Of course, obviously. But we're no less human based on our size. So the argument goes like this. Can we kill a 4-year-old who is smaller than the 14-year-old simply because she's not as big as a teenager? Of course not. I mean, it's absurd to even say that. Well, in the same way, the unborn is smaller than the 4-year-old. Does this mean that they somehow lose value? We could say this: a human being's value is not based on their size. If we can't kill a 4-year-old because she's smaller, and we can't kill the unborn simply because they're smaller. Does this make sense? It can't be because, well, it's so small, it's so hard to see. Well, hold on. When does size dictate value? And at what point do we say, okay, now they are of size that they are a person? Size is not a good reason to distinguish the difference between a fetus and a human. That's the S in the SLED argument. The L stands for level of development. Much like the size argument, there is a difference of a level of development. But even though a human being is not devalued based on their size, the unborn is clearly less developed than the born human being. I mean, this by definition, right? That they are developing in mother's womb. We see this, that a 4-year-old girl can't bear children because her reproductive system is less developed than a 14-year-old girl. Is the fact that they aren't fully developed, does that disqualify someone from being a person? That they aren't fully developed. If you have children, you know this from the very beginning, that they're always developing. In fact, they aren't probably fully developed till like mid to even late 20s, and it seems to be getting like that number actually seems to be expanding before like your brain is officially finished developing. And this is the hard news is that as soon as you're finished developing, you start undeveloping. Did you know that? Like the over the hill, it used to be 40, and now it's supposedly it's like 50 is the new 40. It's actually like probably 29 where you're at your peak, and then I mean you know this. It's like okay, I have fully developed, and I'm on the other side. I'm on the other side of that slope. Development is not a good reason to distinguish a person's value. It doesn't disqualify her from being from personhood. This little child, if you have children, they are still just as equally valuable as a childbearing teen or a young mom or someone who has raised children or the one who is an empty nester or those who aren't able to have children anymore or whenever we're able to have children. Like it cannot be simply, well, my level of development determines if I'm a person. Well, hold on now. That doesn't work in any other area. Why would that be a reason that a fetus is different than a human here? In the same way, the unborn is also less developed than the 4-year-old. We can't disqualify her from personhood because, for the same reason, we can't disqualify the 4-year-old just because they aren't fully developed. Doesn't mean they aren't a person. Doesn't mean they don't have value, and that value and that person should be protected. Both are merely less developed than older human beings. Okay, here's the E. E stands for environment. We know this. The unborn is located in a different environment than the born human, right? To put it bluntly, the unborn is in the womb. By definition, once you're born, you are no longer in the womb. That's the location difference, is the womb. The process in which you leave the womb is called birth, childbirth, right? Whether it be natural or C-section. That's the process by which you change environments. But how does your location affect value? Can changing your environment also alter your status as a person? Once you're born, it's irrelevant. And it doesn't matter which side of the argument you fall on. Once you're born, you can go wherever you want and you're still a person. The place you are has no bearing on who you are, we could say. If changing environment can change your status, your fundamental status, then being inside or outside a uterus can't be relevant either. If simply moving around doesn't change your personhood, then it would be hard to argue that simply transferring from a womb to a not womb also then should be transforming of your status. This seems to be where a lot of the argument rests, and we'll talk about really like in a second here where all of this hinges. It all hinges on one thing, but this seems to be the discussion and the debate as to if you are pro-choice and pro-abortion, This is the thing that you try to determine when and if abortion is okay is fully decided on the environment. And depending on your position on abortion, and it's so complicated because it's all over the place. There are plenty who will say, as long as the baby is in the womb, it can be aborted, right? And we can have abortions up to birth, late-term abortions, even partial birth abortions, if you've heard of these. And it's all based on this. It's just environment. Hey, as long as they're not out, then it's fine. I hope we can see that this would be a problem, even just logically. How can a 7-inch journey through the birth canal magically transform a valueless human into a valuable person? Right? I mean, what we're talking about is moving 7 inches. Nothing, listen, especially at the end, nothing has changed except the location. That's it. It's hard to then say, well, while they're in the womb, they aren't a person. Once they're out of the womb, they are a person. Well, hold on. Listen, I understand the convenience of that. But is this moral? Here's the last one. Dependency. So we went through S, size, L, level of development, E is environment, and D is dependency, or sometimes described as degree of dependency. The unborn is dependent on the mother's body for nutrition and proper environment, right? I mean, this is why it takes in people, us humans, 9 months, give or take, for a person to fully develop, because mama is building this baby. And so they are fully dependent on mom. Towards the end, they are less dependent. This is why they want all women to get to a certain week where they're like, hey, now the baby will be most viable and able to survive outside the womb. But even in the beginning, throughout the whole time, the unborn is dependent on mom. Yet newborns, ready for this? Newborns and toddlers are still dependent on their parents to provide nutrition and safe environment. Again, what has changed? If you've had children, you know this, and you know, we went through this. We have 4 kids, and with every one of them, the feeling is the same. Though it got easier as the more children you have, probably the crazier you are, but also the more you understand what to expect and what's coming, right? With the first child, we even got, my wife got the book, what to expect when you're expecting, and that was every night. I'm every night reading, and this is the book, and I don't know the author who wrote that, but she was my wife's best friend, and what she says, and it was what to expect when you're, and it was this is the Bible, right? And we have the Bible, but with the babies, this is what to expect when you're expecting. You probably give that to expecting mothers. And by the 4th one, hey, whatever happens, whatever. We'll figure it out. I don't know. And you go through this. And with each kid though, especially with the first one, I remember distinctly, and maybe you do too. You go to the hospital, we have no kids. Life was perfect. And then you're gonna have a baby, and you go to the hospital, and there's 2 of you. I mean, there's 3 of you, but only, there's 3 persons, but only in 2 seats. So you go in 2, and then you go through this honestly incredible, but also overwhelming experience. And then you have a child, and then you get to hold this thing, and you're this is that's part of me, half me, right? Whoa, this is a person, and a real person. When he was still in the womb, it was just movements and shaking stuff. I don't know, could have been anything. But now you're here. And here's the thing, you don't realize this, you do with your other kids. With our other kids, we're how can we stay at the hospital the longest? Because you have nurses helping, and it's awesome, right? In the beginning, they're oh, we'll help change a diaper. Oh, you just rest, you want another shake? Oh, yeah, it has, as the father, it has been rough on me. I would like another shake. And And then here's the whole point. And then when you go home and you have this child, and you realize there's no nurse there. And you realize 100% of this child's ability to survive is on us. 100%. It will. This child, like our firstborn was a son. He will eat when we feed him. Some other things he'll do on his own, and it's like, okay, you're in for it. But like, it's our job to take care of you, 100%. And then as they get older, it becomes less and less. It's not 100%. And then they get to a point where it's like, okay, 0%. You can just do this. And, maybe you're moving out of the house, or hopefully, it's by then they're at 100%. But when a newborn is born and they're 100% dependent on mom, probably like a 0.5% dependent on dad, are they less of a person? Are they less valuable because they are fully dependent on someone else to sustain them, to keep them alive? The unborn are dependent on the mother for nutrition and proper environment, yet newborns also are fully dependent on their parents. Can a mother kill her newborn son because he's dependent on her body for nutrition? This is why the dependency argument simply doesn't work, because there are countless situations where other humans are fully dependent on someone else. That doesn't mean they're not a person. So just because the baby inside the womb is fully dependent on mom doesn't mean that disqualifies them from being a person. Can we rightfully terminate those with dementia, who cannot care for themselves, who rely completely on others to meet their basic needs? The answer to that is almost absurd. Of course not. Until you read and see that there are people who actually believe that, well, yeah, this actually applies, the same argument applies. What? It can't be that level of dependency means you are a human or not a human. If viability, the ability to survive or live successfully, makes us human, then all those who depend on medication or caregivers are not viable and may be killed. This would mean anyone who is fully dependent on someone else to live. Are they somehow less human? Of course not. So we see viability outside the womb cannot determine value. All of this, here's the deal. All of this rests on one question. It's the question that is either defended fiercely or avoided completely. And that is this: is the fetus a human being? Is it a person? Is this fetus growing inside mom's womb, is it a human? And this is where the science debate is argued, because it seems like the debate is to split hairs over what we mean by human, or at what point they become human, and maybe that's not a human, and you'll get people to say it's not a human, it's just a clump of cells, and we can have those discussions. We'll look here at objections to pro-life arguments and how to interact in these conversations gracefully, but also firmly with strong conviction. But is the fetus a human being? If the answer is yes, it probably determines your view on abortion. If the answer is no, then you have some explaining to explain how that's not a human. And what is it if it's not a human? Or what I like to call a future human. It's not a future human, or a potential, or given enough time, that will be a human. That is in all definitions. objections to pro-life arguments. And you have these, again, written down. We'll just go through them. And some of it is like usually what you hear, and so we'll respond. Number one, a woman has a fundamental right to her body that trumps the right of the unborn. And some will say, even if it's a human. So we can discuss like this. If the fetus is her body, can a woman take medication to ease her symptoms if it will deform the fetus? This is one of the reasons why alcohol and smoking and like all of the vices, that it's like, hey, if pregnant, don't do this because you're affecting the baby. Now, if the fetus is the mother's body, shouldn't it be her decision? None of us would say, oh yeah, you know what? I see you're pregnant, drink up. I mean, you talk about irresponsible. Because we all know, here's the deal, we all know that's a baby. And that's gonna affect that person's life. That's not just mom's body. That's not a clump of cells or a polyp. That is a person. Not fully developed yet, of course. But what you do can affect this person. Why is it okay for the mother to kill her unborn child, but not harm her unborn child through the use of a drug, especially if it's her body? For me, I truly I am gracious and want to understand, and I've gone through my era in life where I just wanted to argue and fight and win, and I don't want to argue and fight and win. But I do enter into discussions to say, okay, let's just agree to be consistent here. And this is one of those things that is extremely inconsistent, that I can choose to end this fetus's life, but it's wrong for me to do anything else to harm it. Well, if it's just my body, the arguments don't speak to a consistent value. It makes sense. Here's another one that has come up in the past. It's above my pay grade to determine when life begins. Maybe have you heard this before? This is usually where a lot of politicians land, because it's just the kick the can down the road. You know what? I'm no expert in this, and I'm not smart enough to understand it, so it's not up to me. Can I be honest, right? There is not a person who says that who doesn't have an opinion about abortion. There's not a person who says that who says, I've really never thought about this. Especially a politician. I've really never thought about this, and it's just above my pay grade. Okay, you know what? I'll take you at your word. Let's talk about this. If that's the case, if it really is above your and my pay grade, my first question would be, whose pay grade is it? Who gets to decide? The second is this: if that's the case, it's above our pay grade, then how about this? Then we shouldn't kill the unborn, because we may be in fact killing a human. If you're saying we don't know, we should probably err on the side of caution. If we're saying we don't know, a responsible person, as responsible people, we err on the side of caution because if we don't have a definitive answer. It's above my pay grade means, hey, it's not my job to figure this out. All the more reason that we should say, then you know what? Then let's just wait on it. Because if it's above our pay grade and we do make the wrong choice, man, what if we're actually ending human life then? It's above my pay grade really is I want to avoid, and I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to discuss it. As convenient as that may be, again, if I'm honest, at 62 million aborted babies, that's not a good enough answer. That's above my pay grade. Number 3. This one. Here it is. Even if you're right, all right. even if you're right, okay, that the fetus is a human being, or a future human being, or a potential human being, realistically, politically, historically, we can't end abortions. But we can work to reduce them. And maybe you've heard this explained, and especially around voting time, people will talk about, again, splitting hairs as to right or wrong, what we can do or can't do or should do. But here's the thing. Now, just to not intentionally pour gasoline on this, but by default, it does. What if we said the same thing about slavery? We can't end this. What if we said the same, legitimately? What if we said the same thing about slavery in the 1800s? We can't outlaw slavery, which, listen, our country, it's just too important. The economic structure is just too big, and there's just no way to do it. So let's just try to limit it. None of us here would say, you know what, that's a morally acceptable position. That's a good compromise. We hear that and say, no, of course, no. We abolish slavery. The parallel between slavery and abortion is honestly striking. I was sharing this before. It's almost a one-to-one. The reasons to be pro-abortion and pro-slavery are almost identical. For instance, it's my body, my decision. The slave owner would say it's my property, my choice. Who are you to tell me what I do with my property? The fetus is not a human. The slave was not considered a human, even when they got voting rights. Right? It was 2/5. This idea of, hey, let's just reduce abortions because we can't end it is admitting that, you know what, there's no chance to come out on the morally right side here. So let's just give up trying to abolish it. Could you imagine if the abolitionists in the 1800s said, you know what, we're never going to win, so let's just stop trying. Here's the second part. If we try to limit the amount of abortions while still making it perfectly legal to kill the unborn, we're saying the same thing. And here's the thing, if abortion is morally okay, then why try to reduce them? I've never really understood this argument that, hey, we can't end it, so let's just reduce it. If it's okay, why? If this is just a surgical procedure to remove something that's a part of the body, what's wrong with it then? Why even try to reduce it? Because here's the thing. If we're honest, we all know that that's a human, a future potential. One day will be a real life person, just like we all were once a fetus. Okay, here we go. What about the instance of rape? Should a mother be forced to keep a child that was conceived from rape? This is usually where the argument will go to get a pro-life person to say, okay, I will allow it in special circumstances. And then to extrapolate, well, if you allow it in this circumstance as being okay, then it should be okay in other circumstances. That's the process of trying to bring this up. Now, my response is this. Before we have this conversation, will you agree that abortion should only be allowed in this case? So for instance, statistically of the 1,000 abortions that have happened, less than 0.5, less than 0.1% are because of rape. All right, so let's just do the math. That means we'll do the 0.5, we'll do the higher one. That means out of 1,000 abortions, 1,000 of them, 5 on the high end, 5 were a result of rape. All right, how about this? Let's agree to outlaw the other 995, and then we can talk about this one. And the response is, well, no, we can't do that. Hold on now, hold on. Even if we say, okay, all right, we make an exception, will you agree to address abortion for all the other ones? Usually the answer is, well, of course not. Of course not. No, it's choice. And this discussion is almost and kind of a intellectual trap. Now, here's the deal. You can't come up with one exception and then make it the rule in all cases. Here's an equivalent line of reasoning. I think we got it. An equivalent line of reasoning is this. Applying this line of reasoning to an issue of killing another person, it would be like saying, because we can justify certain instances of killing, i.e. in self-defense, we should allow all instances of killing. It's absurd. To allow it in one instance means you have to do it in all. All right, as if that wasn't hard enough, here we go. Questions to ask specifically about this issue. Should we kill another human being because we've been victimized? Should we kill an unborn baby because once born, he or she may remind the mother of her attacker? Should we kill another human being because he or she isn't wanted? You can tell how personal and intense this is just by this room even. We're talking about real life issues here. This isn't like a political agenda or how you should vote. This is real. And the consequences of how we answer these questions affects people's entire lives. So the question then is, and I don't even want to tell you where you should land on this. Does this make it okay? This issue is, like I said, usually used as almost like a gotcha. And then when you look at it and realize just how low that percentage is, that easily, by far and above, the number of aborted babies are because of just personal convenience issues, that this really isn't the crux of an argument. Here's the last one, and then we'll move on to the more experiential, personal. This will come up. Well, this is a personal conviction. You can't impose your personal conviction on someone else. Even as I'm up here, you may be thinking like, all right, listen, first of all, who are you to tell me what I should believe? And even this, who are you as a man to tell me what I should be able to do as a woman with my body? Hey, that's fair. Totally, I get it. Totally get it. But the problem is we don't apply that standard to really any other issue. It's just this one. What if we did this? What if we changed the issue to spousal abuse? Would you say that it's your own personal view? We can almost name any other issue and say, hey, that's just a personal conviction. Who are you to tell me that it's wrong? Well, wait a minute. It's my personal conviction because it's wrong. For another, even maybe for a lot of us, again, this is another area of just honestly, just unashamed inconsistency. If someone has a personal view that allows them to harm their spouse, or even their pet, should we not pass laws against those things? Well, that's just a personal conviction. Listen, that's not right or wrong. I would argue that some things are right and some things are wrong regardless of a personal conviction here. And so here's the deal. I'll wrap up and then we'll certainly have a time for Q&A. To put it plainly, here it is. If the unborn fetus is a human, then killing them simply because they are an inconvenience is a serious moral wrong. If the unborn fetus is a human, which I would argue, and I think even as Bible-believing, faithful followers of Jesus, that we are compelled to understand, to believe this. If the unborn fetus is a human, then their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness should be granted and protected just as much as yours and mine. One personal story, and then I'll have our guests come up. I have a buddy of mine who I've had a number of these conversations with people who talk to me and tell me about just how prevalent the advice to have an abortion is in the medical field. And so this guy's a doctor. He and his wife are both doctors. And with their first child, they did a scan, and there was this mass that was on their the head, the brain, they said. And the first response, and this was a colleague with his colleague, and he said his first advice was, hey, you might want to think about aborting because you don't know what quality of life will be. And he's even, we're over a decade and a half later, and we're driving in his Jeep, and he's like getting upset just thinking about it. He's like, I'm like, I can't believe that was, I'm in the medical world, and like, I was so offended that the first response was, hey, we should probably think about not doing this. And he was like, and they're not believers. It's not like he has a conviction like we do. He was just like, no, that's my son. That's my future son. And of course they decided to have the child, and he goes, Brandon, he was born perfect, healthy baby boy. He just had a little hematoma on his side. He goes, and it just went away over time. It was no big deal at all. He goes, I still think about writing a letter to that doctor because he's thinking, how many other children were aborted over a nothing thing? So I understand a couple things. Number one, it is really easy to get unfortunate, poor advice. And it's really easy to also say, oh man, I messed up, or I don't know. I didn't know which way was up. And so we're going to talk about here in a personal, how on a personal level, how to deal with this. But as intellectual as this is, and I hope this doesn't feel cold, like, oh, we're just talking about this like it's not a real thing. It very much is a real thing. And it's a real thing with people in this room that I've talked to, that you've even shared, like, yeah, this is part of my past. And let me tell you a little bit about my story. And it's like, oh my goodness, okay. This, like our church is affected by this issue. So as we move from kind of a philosophical, moral description and in reasoning as to why it's wrong, I want to move to a personal one. So we've invited someone to come and share, and she's sharing as a mental health counselor. This is what she does as a profession, and she's also a New Hoper. She's one of us, and so I don't know. There she is. So will you help me welcome Larissa Mettler to come share with us? Thanks so much. Welcome. We have a TV. Yeah. We have both a mic and a TV in front of you to block you, so no one can see you.
I can be
Should we watch? This is strong. Tyler Vladika, everyone. That is a man. All right. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good.
So thanks for being here and being with us. And the first thing I want to ask is, tell us what advice you would have for someone who has experienced an abortion that has been affected by this, and even if you're sitting in a one-on-one, I know this is not one-on-one, but what you would share with them.
Yeah, sure. Is this on? Okay.
Flip
Can
it
I
up.
turn it on?
Yeah, if the on, yep, you're good.
That's what the on button means.
Yeah.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for covering this topic. I think this is a really heavy and hard topic to cover. So I think just your willingness to bring it up is really important. And I want to speak to you from the perspective of a mental health provider in the community. And first of all, I want to say, I was reading statistics before I came, and I heard the ones that you gave, but one of the ones that I read was that 1 in 4 women under the age of 45 have had an abortion. And what that tells me is not just that affected women, that affected men, right? Because there were people who were partners of these people who had the abortions. They may not, as a man, may not have had a say, or maybe they were in a position where they felt at that time that was the right thing to do for whatever reason. So this isn't something that just impacts women, it impacts men. It impacts you as a parent of somebody who's gone through with this. It impacts you as a friend, or even experiencing it with another loved one. So this probably touches a lot more of us than maybe we would have thought in the beginning when this topic came up. So I think that's important to think about first. And what I would say is that every decision has a story. And somebody felt like this was the right option for their life at the time for whatever reason. And I think that it's important to realize that. But the negative consequences that we see in the field with abortion and other traumatic situations, particularly ones where you felt like you had involvement in it, are that it can impact people with low self-esteem. It can impact people with depression. It can give them anxiety, delayed grief. And these issues are often, abortion, an issue like this, is often sort of a root issue. And so someone could be experiencing these feelings and not recognize that it's correlated to that decision. Another thing is that, in this one I could have like a whole 2-hour or longer time talking to you guys about shame. And that's really the emotion that I wanted to touch on tonight. And shame is this messy emotion, and what it does is it tells somebody not that I made a bad decision, but that I am bad. And because of that, I think people build fortresses around these things that could make them feel ashamed. And so what that looks like, I think, in people's lives, particularly in a situation like abortion, is that I don't want anyone to touch that. So maybe avoidance of the topic might be something that shows up for somebody, and it's just like, nope, it didn't affect me, it's fine, I moved on with my life. That is a defense around shame. Maybe there's defensiveness, and it's like, you wouldn't understand where I was coming from, nobody can understand me, and just, really feeling like I don't want anyone to touch that. And it can show up in, not being able to experience situations fully, like maybe you had an abortion in a certain season of life, like maybe it was around Christmas, and so you're struggling, having a good time at Christmas, or you have your first child, and there's this delayed grief around that decision. So I really just wanted to let you guys understand some of the impact of this kind of decision on mental health.
People that I've talked to that have gone through this and come out on the other side, and whatever that means, but at least are in a healthy place now, will all say that I didn't realize how this would affect me long term, even, and even thinking back of what could have been, and it's a decision that happens in a moment, but the fallout is not as brief.
Sure, I don't know if you can anticipate sometimes. Sometimes, you're in the moment, you can't see past the moment, and that moment is going to impact you to a level of severity that you don't understand later.
So as a counselor, but also as a mental health professional, but also as a Christian, what advice would you have for us, or for ladies you're meeting with, about this particular issue?
Sure. One of the things I would say is, if you have somebody or you've directly impacted it and you haven't been able to talk to somebody about it, it's really important that situations like this don't just stay dormant in your life. Because like I said with shame, shame it just kind of seeps through every area of your life. And if a situation like this is causing you to feel negative emotions, being able to share that with people, get it exposed, isolation and hiding is like kind of like a petri dish for shame. But vulnerability and connectivity is sort of like, what is it, the kryptonite for shame, right? Like the more we can be seen and be understood and connect with people, the more shame loses its power. And I don't know if this was part of this, what you were asking, but the other piece I wanted to say is that God is so awesome that our stories absolutely can change around these decisions. And that's not just because I'm a therapist, and if I didn't believe that people's stories could change, then I probably shouldn't be in this profession. So I'm not here to sell you on this idea that there can be redemption, but we really do have a redemptive God. And he created our brains with something called neuroplasticity. I don't know if any of you have heard of that before, but neuroplasticity is so awesome. It's essentially, to dumb it down, it's like whatever we're doing a lot of, our brain creates very quick connections in our neurons so that we don't have to think about those processes. So, breathing, or maybe I eat at a certain time every day. I don't even have to think about that. Like I get hungry and I eat. And so that efficiency in our brain is super helpful. But what that also means is that we can have like these associations to events that we don't even recognize that we're experiencing. So this comes up, I feel shame. This comes up, I feel low self-esteem. This comes up, I feel negatively. And so those same connections can be really negative in our lives. But the super cool part is that the more we challenge those connections, the more we, by doing things like sharing our story with people and getting feedback and having people say, well, hey, have you thought about how maybe at that time in your life you were struggling with this? Or, shedding light into the area. And then we start to think, yeah, that's true. I've never thought about it like that. Or maybe you're working with a mental health, counselor or something, and they explain to you about how your background and the things you went through in your life kind of led up to that decision. And then you start getting this new information. Your brain can actually begin to change the associations with that memory and also the feelings around that memory over time. And those new neural connections are going to form, and those older thoughts are going to atrophy. So that's just so cool to me that that's the God that we serve, and that's scientifically proven as well.
I love how you explain it, even scientifically, and then spiritually. I think we call that forgiveness.
It's redemption,
right? And that God uses this process of forgiveness to literally, like Paul says, that you're a new creation, and what do you know? Your brain is literally being created newly, so that like how we interact and live and function is different. It's not just a cool verse or a saying. God actually is able to change us, and it's through His grace. And I love that. That's so cool. Okay, I want to make sure we have time for some Q&A. But before we do, can you share some services that are offered both in town that you know about for those of us that would maybe say like maybe I want to talk to someone, I don't even know what to do, but what kind of help is offered?
Yeah, so I am a mental health counselor. This is not a plug for me, but I believe in the field. There are people in our church also that are other therapists as well, but there are the whole community of people that can walk with you through these types of situations. But also there's pregnancy resource centers of Central Oregon, and they have locations in Prineville, they have Bend, they have Redmond, and those services are amazing, particularly for this topic, because you have people on staff who have actually had abortions. You can talk with people. There are groups that you can join. A lot of support coming out of that area as well. So I think that there's definitely resources. If anybody needs those resources, wants to talk to me after service, or just has questions about anything that I talked about, absolutely, please come and talk with me if you want to. But yeah, thank you for letting me come and share.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much. Can we thank you for being a part of this, for sharing? Awesome.